العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فمن حاجك فيه من بعد ما جاءك من العلم فقل تعالوا ندعو أبناءنا وأبناءكم ونساءنا ونساءكم وأنفسنا وأنفسكم ثم نبتهل فنجعل لعنة الله على الكاذبين. On the dawn of the 19th of the holy month of Ramadan in the year 40 after Hijrah, Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam was struck on his head while prostrating to his Lord. He was struck by a sword of a wicked man, Abdurrahman ibn Muljim, who had placed his sword in the poison, and he struck Amir al-Mu'mineen while Amir al-Mu'mineen was praying and worshipping his Lord. 2 days later, Amir al-Mu'mineen left this life and passed away on the 21st of the holy month of Ramadan, where a life of devotion to God, a life of sacrifice, a life of faith came to an end after 63 years of struggles, after 63 years of standing with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa and firmly defending the Quran and defending the message of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa. Amir al-Mu'mineen didn't just become a supporter of the Muslim movement. Amir al-Mu'mineen embodied the movement of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa. Amir al-Mu'mineen became the soul of Rasulullah and the soul of the Quran, where the Quran describes him as the nafs of Rasulullah, and Rasulullah describes him as the Quranun Natiq, as the speaking Quran. This was Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, and he lived a life of worship. He was born in the holiest places of worship, and his life came to an end while he is worshipping in Masjid al-Kufa. And we are not shocked to hear that, because Amir al-Mu'mineen, his whole life was a life of devotion to God and to devotion to the Quran and to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa. Today Muslims are divided and they ask, who should we follow after Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa? Should we take the path of the Sahaba, the path of the companions, or should we take the path of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, the path of Ali ibn Abi Talib? My dear brothers and sisters, if we are unbiased, if we remove emotions, and we analyze Islamic history as it is written by Muslims who were not necessarily Shia and the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, we will see that the greatest individual and the person most fit for the Khilafah and the person who was the closest to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa was Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. While others, they joined the Islamic movement while they were in their 40s and in their 50s, Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib was with the Prophet from day one. Amir al-Mu'mineen believed in the Prophet, defended the Prophet. He sacrificed everything that he had for the sake of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa and the message of Rasulullah. He describes in Nahj al-Balagha, he tells people, وَلَقَدْ عَلِمْتُمْ مَوْضِعِي مِنْ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَآلِهِ بِالْقَرَابَةِ الْقَرِيبَةِ وَالْمَنْزِلَةِ الْخَصِيصَةِ. You know my position. He's telling the Muslims, you know how close I am to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa. I was the closest in rank, the closest in position, in distance. وَضَعَنِي فِي حِجْرِهِ وَأَنَا وَلِيدٌ. He says, the other Muslims, they joined and they were with the Prophet once they were adults. Their life started with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa. Some of them, they were fighting the Prophet. They were against the religion of Islam, and then they joined the religion of Islam. He says, I was with the Prophet when I was a newborn baby. وَضَعَنِي فِي حِجْرِهِ وَأَنَا وَلِيدٌ يَضُمُّنِي إِلَى صَدْرِهِ وَيُكَنِّفُنِي فِي فِرَاشِهِ. He holds me close to his chest, and he places me in the bed. وَيَمُسُّنِي جَسَدَهُ وَيَشُمُّنِي عَرْفَهُ, and our bodies would touch, and I would smell the scent of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The same way a father or a mother holds their children, holds the infant, the newborn, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam held Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. This was the relationship between them two. And then he says, وَكَانَ يَمْضُغُ الشَّيْء ثُمَّ يُلْقِمْنِيهِ. He used to chew the food and then place it in my mouth. The same way a mother or the same way a father would do. وَمَا وَجَدَ لِي كَذْبَةٌ فِي قَوْلٍ وَلَا خَطْلَةٌ فِي فِعْلٍ. And he never saw that I lied. Never saw that I made a mistake. Even Rasulullah was in love with Amir al-Mu'mineen. Rasulullah saw Amir al-Mu'mineen as the continuation of the legacy and the mission of Rasulullah. The same way a father or mother, they see their children, they are their continuation and they continue their legacy. In another part of Nahj al-Balagha, in another sermon, Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, he describes how he was the one who buried Rasulullah. The first hadith talks about how Amir al-Mu'mineen was born and he opened his eyes to see Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The second sermon, another sermon, it describes how when Rasulullah was dying or when Rasulullah passed away, the last one he saw was Amir al-Mu'mineen. And the one who buried Rasulullah was also Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. This is the closeness between these two. He says, وَلَقَدْ عَلِمَ الْمُسْتَحْفِظُونَ مِنْ أَصْحَابِ مُحَمَّدٍ صلى الله عليه وآله أني لم أرد على الله وعلى رسوله ساعة قط. He says, those who know Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, they know that I never turned my back on God and turned my back on Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, not even for a moment. What does this mean? This means that there were others from the Sahaba, there were others from the companions who did reject God, who did anger Allah, and they did anger Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. But Amir al-Mu'mineen never angered Rasulullah. Amir al-Mu'mineen was always a loyal soldier, a faithful servant of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. And then he says, وَلَقَدْ وَاسَيْتُهُ بِنَفْسِي فِي الْمَوَاطِنِ الَّتِي تَنْكُصُ فِيهَا الْأَبْطَالِ. He says, I sacrificed from my own. I put my life on the line in the positions where the brave men held back. Where the brave men, they were afraid. They were afraid to make a sacrifice. وَتَتَأَخَّرُ فِيهَا الْأَقْدَامِ. And the feet, sometimes they would slow down in helping, in rescuing, in being there for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. نَجْدَةً أَكْرَمَنِي اللَّهُ بِهَا. This is an honor that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala honored me. Amir al-Mu'mineen is saying, God honored me with this honor and did not give the other Sahaba, the other companions. And then he says, وَلَقَدْ قُبِضَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَآلِهِ وَأَنَّ رَأْسَهُ عَلَى صَدْرِي. And Rasulullah passed away. His soul departed his body while his head was on my chest. While the head of Rasulullah was on the chest. وَلَقَدْ سَالَتْ نَفْسُهُ في كفي فأمررتها على وجهي. And his soul passed by my hand and I wiped that hand on my face. ولقد وليت غسله صلى الله عليه وآله والملائكة أعواني. He says, and I was the one who washed the body of Rasulullah. When a person dies, the closest one to this person is the one who washes the body and the one who takes care of the burial and takes care of all of these issues. While the other Sahaba were busy taking care of their own livelihood and their own life issues and struggles for power, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he was washing the body of Rasulullah. And he says, and the angels were supporting me. وَالْمَلَائِكَةُ أَعْوَانِي. And then he says, فَضَجَّتِ الدَّارُ وَالْأَفْنِيَةِ. And I hear the crying of the angels and the walls crying, مَلَأٌ يَهْبُطْ وَمَلَأٌ يَعْرُجْ. One group of angels descend and another go up, ascend. And then he says, وَمَا فَارَقَتْ سَمْعِي هَيْمَنَةٌ مِّنْهُمْ. And my ears were listening to all of them. Meaning Amir al-Mu'mineen is telling people, I can listen to the angels. And this is something that we see it throughout Nahj al-Balagha. Rasulullah tells him, you hear what I hear and you see what I see, except you're not a prophet. And then he says, يُصَلُّونَ عَلَيْهِ حَتَّى وَارَيْنَاهُ فِي ضَرِيحِهِ فَمَنْ ذَا أَحَقُّ بِهِ مِنِّي حَيًّا وَمَيِّتًا. He says, until we placed him in his grave, and I was hearing the angels. And then he says, and who is closer to Rasulullah? During his life, I was the closest. And even in his death, I was the closest one to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. My dear brothers and sisters, anyone who analyzes the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi and the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen will see that Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib was the closest to Rasulullah. And there was no one that came in between them. There was no one that was closer to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi from the men. Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, she says from the woman, the closest to Rasulullah was his daughter Fatima, and from the men, the closest to Rasulullah was Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. It wasn't other people who were closer, as some make it seem today. This is why in the event of the Mubahala, Amir al-Mu'mineen was brought out. In the verse of the Ahlul Bayt, the family of the Prophet, Amir al-Mu'mineen is a part of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. While the wives of the Prophet are not included in the Ahlul Bayt, in the Shar'i meaning of the Ahlul Bayt, the people of the house, Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib is included. And this is according to all Muslims. According to all Muslims, no one doubts that Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib is a part of the Ahlul Bayt of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. The Ahlul Bayt that have been purified by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran. إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمُ الرِّجْسَ أَهْلَ الْبَيْتِ وَيُطَهِّرَكُمْ تَطْهِيرًا. Amir al-Mu'mineen was the closest to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. And when the verse of Mubahala came down, فَمَنْ حَاجَّكَ فِيهِ مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَكَ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ فَقُلْ تَعَالَوْا نَدْعُوا أَبْنَاءَنَا وَأَبْنَاءَكُمْ وَنِسَاءَنَا وَنِسَاءَكُمْ وَأَنفُسَنَا وَأَنفُسَكُمْ. If someone is debating with you, tell them we will call our family. Call your children and we call our children. He brought Imam al-Hasan and Imam al-Hussein. You bring your woman and we bring our woman. He only brought Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. And you bring your souls, your nafs, and we bring our souls. And who did he bring? He brought Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib as the nafs of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This is why all Muslims, they're in agreement that Amir al-Mu'mineen is the nafs of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He was so close to the Prophet, where when the Prophet chose brothers between the Muslims, he did not give a brother to Ali ibn Abi Talib. Amir al-Mu'mineen tells him, Ya Rasulullah, you made the Muslims brothers, but you did not choose a brother for me. He tells him, I've left you for myself. When Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi closed the doors of the Sahaba that were entering onto the masjid, he kept the door of Ali ibn Abi Talib while he closed the doors of others. When Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi went out in the Mubahala, he brought out Amir al-Mu'mineen as the nafs. This is why Ahmad ibn Hanbal, a Sunni scholar, the leader of the Hanbali school of thought, he was asked, who is the greatest of the companions after Rasulullah? He says Abu Bakr. They tell him, and then who? He says Umar. They tell him, and then who? He says Uthman. They tell him, what about Ali ibn Abi Talib? You didn't mention Ali ibn Abi Talib. And we know for a fact that Ali ibn Abi Talib was a Muslim before the others. Now some, they come and they say, okay, he was the first from the children. He was a Muslim before the others. He was praying before all the others. While the others were worshipping idols, Amir al-Mu'mineen was a believer in God. So they ask Ahmad ibn Hanbal, they tell him, where did you leave out Ali ibn Abi Talib? He tells them, Ali ibn Abi Talib is not to be compared with the Sahaba. Ali ibn Abi Talib, according to the Quran, he's the nafs of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He's the soul of the Prophet. How can you compare the soul with the Sahaba? He says Amir al-Mu'mineen is in a totally different field. He can't even be compared with the Sahaba. But it's one of the greatest acts of oppression against Amir al-Mu'mineen and against Rasulullah and against the religion of Islam is to compare Ali ibn Abi Talib with others. Compare others who are far below him. And the greatest act of oppression was that Amir al-Mu'mineen, his khilafah was delayed, while others who joined the religion of Islam after him, others who had worshipped idols, others who had angered Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa, they took the position. Amir al-Mu'mineen, according to the verse of Mubahala, he's the nafs of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa. Sahih Muslim, today in the Sunni school of thought, there are two very important books, Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. And these books are considered the most authentic books after the Quran. Of course, in the Shi'i school of thought, we have other criteria to see which hadith is accepted and which is not. But this is a hadith that is mentioned by Sahih Muslim. Rawa Muslim fi Sahihih. And he says that Muawiyah, one of the things he was doing was he was bringing the Sahaba and the Tabi'een, and he would give them money to curse Ali ibn Abi Talib and to fabricate false accusations against Imam Ali alayhi salam, because he had his own personal agenda. He wanted power, he wanted rule, he brought his son, and he wanted to destroy Amir al-Mu'mineen, destroy him in the battle, kill him in the battle, and he also wanted to use propaganda to destroy the reputation of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And this is why Bani Umayyah, they were cursing Ali ibn Abi Talib. Muawiyah, he started the sunnah, the tradition of cursing Imam Ali, and this lasted for over 80 years. Over 80 years, until Umar ibn Abdul Aziz came, he stopped it. Towards the end of the Umayyi Caliphate, he came and he stopped it. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib was cursed. On every Friday prayer, they would curse him. So, in this hadith that is mentioned in Sahih Muslim, Muawiyah, he sees Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas is the father of Umar ibn Sa'd. Umar ibn Sa'd was the man who led the army that killed Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, he was a fighter and he conquered Persia. He conquered Iraq. Iraq was under the Persian Empire at that time. He conquered it. So he was a known hero and he's from the Sahaba. So Muawiyah, he sees him and he tells him, "Ma mana'aka an tasub Aba Turab." He tells him, why is it that when I tell you to curse Aba Turab means Ali ibn Abi Talib. One of the titles and the nicknames of Imam Ali is Aba Turab, and this was a title given to him by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. And Ibn Abbas, he says that the reason why Rasulullah gave him that title was because Amir al-Mu'mineen would sleep on the sand, he would sleep on the ground. So one day Rasulullah, he's waking him up, he tells him, "Qum ya Aba Turab." Stand up, O Aba Turab, you are the father of the earth, father of earth. So Ibn Abbas, he also gives this tafsir. He says on the day of judgment, when the kafir, when the zalim, when the oppressor sees that they have lost everything, what will they say? Allah says in the Quran that the kuffar, what will they say? Ya laytani kuntu turaba. I wish I was dirt. I wish I was soil, so that I don't have to go through this questioning and go through this punishment as a result of my wrongdoing. So Ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Abbas, he says that the ones who reject the wilayah of Amir al-Mu'mineen on the day of judgment, they will say, Ya laytani kuntu turaba. Because the love of Ali ibn Abi Talib distinguishes between the hellfire and paradise. And this is a hadith that's accepted by all Muslims. That the one who loves Ali ibn Abi Talib is a mu'min, and the one who hates Ali ibn Abi Talib is a munafiq. This is a hadith accepted by all Muslims. Now, Muawiyah tells Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, "Ma mana'aka an tasub Aba Turab." Why don't you curse? Why don't you use foul language against Aba Turab? Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, he tells him, I will not and I cannot curse Ali ibn Abi Talib for three positions, for three things I saw from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. The first was that when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi was preparing an army to go to Tabuk, he tells Ali ibn Abi Talib, you stay in Medina and you do not join us in this expedition. And this was the last expedition in the life of the Prophet where there was no battle, there was no war. the Muslims, they were going. It was in the middle of summer. Many of them didn't want to go. Rasulullah asked them to go. He left Amir al-Mu'mineen. He tells him, you become the leader in charge of Medina. And this is Rasulullah signaling to the Muslims that when I leave town, I'm leaving Ali ibn Abi Talib. So some of them, they come to Amir al-Mu'mineen, some of the Muslims, they come and they tell him, Rasulullah left you with the women and the children. So Amir al-Mu'mineen, being that he was an individual who wanted to defend Rasulullah, wanted to be there for the Prophet, he comes and he tells Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah, they're saying that you left me with the women and the children. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi tells him the statement. And Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas is saying this. He says that Rasulullah told him, أَمَا تَرْضَى أَن تَكُونَ مِنِّي بِمَنْزِلَةِ هَارُونَ مِنْ مُوسَى إِلَّا أَنَّهُ لَا نَبِيَّ مِنْ بَعْدِي. Aren't you satisfied that you are to me like what Aaron was to Moses, except there is no prophet, except you're not a prophet after me? Meaning that you are the one who I'm leaving behind me. When I'm gone, when I leave, when I die, you are the one who I'm leaving behind me, except you're not a prophet. You are not a Nabi, and you are an Imam. He says, this is one. He says, the other thing that stops me from cursing Ali ibn Abi Talib was on the day of Khaybar. On the day of Khaybar, when Rasulullah sent first Abu Bakr, he comes back, يُجَبِّنُ أَصْحَابَهُ وَيُجَبِّنُهُ. He's telling his people, you were not successful, you're scared, and they tell him, no, you're scared. And then the next day, Umar ibn Umar, he goes and he comes back not having conquered the fort of Khaybar. The third day, or after he came back, he tells them, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa he tells all the Muslims, he tells them, لَأُعْطِيَنَّ الرَّايَةَ رَجُلًا يُحِبُّ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ وَيُحِبُّهُ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ. This is in Sahih Muslim. Now in the other traditions, Rasulullah describes him as karrar, ghayr farrar, as a person who goes forward, does not run away. And he says, لَأُعْطِيَنَّ الرَّايَةَ رَجُلًا, to a man, a real man, the definition of a man, يُحِبُّ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ, who loves God and loves the Prophet, and God and the Prophet love him as well. He says, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, he says, on that day, all of the Muslims, they said, Inshallah, Rasulullah picks us. And they didn't think that Ali ibn Abi Talib will be chosen, because Ali ibn Abi Talib had pain in his eyes. He had pain in his eyes, and he had his eyes wrapped, and he was laying down. He couldn't walk, he couldn't do anything. He says the next day, when all of us, we were hoping that Rasulullah picks us, the next day Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa tells them, bring me Ali. They tell him, Ali? Ali is laying down, Ali can't even see. He tells them, bring me Ali ibn Abi Talib. They bring Ali ibn Abi Talib while they're holding him by his hands and his eyes are tied. He brings down the band that's covering his eyes, and Rasulullah places his blessed saliva on the face, on the eyes of Ali ibn Abi Talib. Amir al-Mu'mineen opens his eyes and he's able to see, and he goes and he kills Marhab. This was a second reason why Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas does not curse Ali ibn Abi Talib. And of course, that day, the battle of Khaybar, Amir al-Mu'mineen was able to lift a gate, a huge gate, that 44 men would have to open and close. Ya qali' al-bab alladhi ajuzat. He says, the poem says, the one who raises the door that akuffun arba'una wa arba'u, 44 hands were not able to carry this door. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib was able to open it and able to conquer the fort of Khaybar. He says the third reason why I do not curse Ali ibn Abi Talib is the verse of Mubahala. فَقُلْ تَعَالَوْا نَدْعُوا أَبْنَاءَنَا وَأَبْنَاءَكُمْ وَنِسَاءَنَا وَنِسَاءَكُمْ وَأَنفُسَنَا وَأَنفُسَكُمْ. The verse that we explained in the event of the Mubahala. And then once they came, he says it was Ali ibn Abi Talib, Fatima al-Zahra, Imam al-Hasan and Imam al-Hussein. And Rasulullah says, هَؤُلَاء أَهْلِ بَيْتِي, these are my family, these are the Ahl al-Bayt. So Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, he says, Muawiyah, sorry, I will not curse Ali ibn Abi Talib. My dear brothers and sisters, the merits of Amir al-Mu'mineen are so great. And dhikru Ali and ibadah, the remembrance of Ali ibn Abi Talib, the mention of the praise and the merits of Ali ibn Abi Talib is a form of worship. Amir al-Mu'mineen was the first to worship. His remembrance became a type of worship. Ibn Abbas, he says the first to worship with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa was Amir al-Mu'mineen. He says, أول من ركع مع النبي صلى الله عليه وآله هو علي فنزلت فيه الآية وأقيموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة واركعوا مع الراكعين. He says the first to pray with the Prophet was Ali ibn Abi Talib. That the verse came down, أقيموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة واركعوا مع الراكعين. Go and do ruku' with those who are doing ruku'. Those who are doing ruku' were Rasulullah, Amir al-Mu'mineen and Khadijah. And sometimes it was just Rasulullah and Amir al-Mu'mineen. In a hadith, Abu Talib, he's walking with his son Ja'far and he sees Rasulullah praying, and to his right is Amir al-Mu'mineen, and Abu Talib, he sends his son Ja'far, he tells him, Sil janah ibn ammik, go and become a wing and complete the wing of your cousin. Meaning Ali is on his right, you become on his left and you support him. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says, I prayed صليت مع رسول الله قبل الناس بسبع سنين. He says, I prayed before anyone knew what salah was. I was praying with Rasulullah 7 years before anyone else. He was the first to believe, the first to pray with the Prophet. And this is why also Ibn Abbas, he says, the tafsir of this verse, رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا وَلِإِخْوَانِنَا الَّذِينَ سَبَقُونَا فِي الْإِسْلَامِ. Oh Allah, forgive us and forgive those who joined the religion of Islam before us. Ibn Abbas says every Muslim does istighfar for Ali ibn Abi Talib because he joined the religion of Islam before anyone else. He was the first to join the religion of Islam. Another companion, Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman, he describes Amir al-Mu'mineen. He says, when we were in Mecca, كنا نعبد الحجارة, we would worship the stone. ونشرب الخمر, and we would drink alcohol. وعلي من أبناء 14 سنة قائم يصلي مع النبي ليلا ونهارا. He says, we were worshipping the rock and drinking alcohol while Ali ibn Abi Talib was 14 years old praying with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. وقريش يومئذ تسافه رسول الله, and Quraysh was harassing and abusing Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. وما يذب عنه إلا علي, and no one was defending Rasulullah except Ali ibn Abi Talib. It was only Amir al-Mu'mineen who was defending Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. And this is in Sharh ibn Abi al-Hadid. He was the first to put his life on the line for the sake of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. All of the battles testify for Ali ibn Abi Talib. All of the positions where the Muslims were tested. Sometimes they had doubt. Sometimes they ran away from the battle. Sometimes they were doubting in Allah. وَتَظُنُّونَ بِاللَّهِ الظُّنُونَ. Amir al-Mu'mineen was there. On the night of the migration from Mecca to Medina, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi comes to Amir al-Mu'mineen and he tells him, Oh Ali, tonight, Quraysh, 40 men from Quraysh are going to attack my house. And someone has to be sleeping in my bed. Are you willing to sleep in my bed? Amir al-Mu'mineen tells him, yes, Ya Rasulullah. Is my Islam, is my Iman, my faith going to be safe? He tells him, yes. He tells him, then I will do anything for you, Ya Rasulullah. He goes and he sleeps in the bed of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, knowing it's going to be attacked, knowing it's going to be raided. Al-Fakhr al-Razi, in his Tafsir al-Kabir, he mentions in the tafsir of this verse, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَنْ يَشْرِي نَفْسَهُ ابْتِغَاءَ مَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ رَؤُوفٌ بِالْعِبَادِ. And from amongst the people are those who sell themselves, who make that transaction with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They give their soul for the sake of Allah. وَاللَّهُ رَؤُوفٌ بِالْعِبَادِ. Al-Fakhr al-Razi, a Sunni scholar, he says, نزلت في علي بن أبي طالب عليه السلام بات على فراش رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله ليلة خروجه إلى الغار. This verse was revealed in praise of Ali ibn Abi Talib, the night Amir al-Mu'mineen slept in the bed of Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وآله. And he also says, when Ali ibn Abi Talib was sleeping on the bed of Rasulullah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent Jibreel and Mikael to go down to earth and defend Ali ibn Abi Talib. And Jibreel was telling Ali ibn Abi Talib, بخن بخن لك يا علي من مثلك وقد باه الله به ملائكة السماء. Oh Ali, congratulations, oh Ali, who is like you? Where the God is telling the angels, learn from Ali ibn Abi Talib. God tells Jibreel and Mikael, I made you brothers. Which one of you is willing to sacrifice his life for the sake of his brother? None of you will. But Ali ibn Abi Talib, he's willing to sacrifice his life for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Then once the Muslims migrated in the battle of Badr, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he was the one who killed half of the kuffar. He was the one who defended Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. In the battle of Uhud, when the Muslims dispersed, when the Muslims ran away, 5 remained with Rasulullah. One of them was a lady. And Amir al-Mu'mineen was revolving around Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, the same way a butterfly flies around the light, defending Rasulullah. Anytime a group, they would come to attack, Rasulullah would tell Ali ibn Abi Talib, oh Ali, remove them from me. And Amir al-Mu'mineen would fight and fight until his body was filled with wounds for the sake of fighting for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib fought until his sword broke. Then Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi gives him a sword. Rasulullah gave him Dhul Fiqar. And the angel Jibreel calls out, La fata illa Ali, la sayfa illa Dhul Fiqar. There is no man like Ali ibn Abi Talib from amongst the Muslims, and there is no sword like Dhul Fiqar. In the battle of Ahzab, in the battle of Khandaq, the battle of the ditch, where Allah describes the fear that was in the heart of the Muslims. Allah describes, إِذْ جَاءُوكُم مِّن فَوْقِكُمْ وَمِنْ أَسْفَلَ مِنْكُمْ. They came from the north and from the south. The Muslims were surrounded from all sides. They had some groups and tribes of the Jews that had a pact with the Muslims. They came and they betrayed the Muslims. They surrounded the Muslims from all sides. The Muslims had to dig a trench to defend themselves. إِذْ جَاءُوكُم مِّن فَوْقِكُمْ وَمِنْ أَسْفَلَ مِنْكُمْ وَإِذْ زَاغَتِ الْأَبْصَارُ وَبَلَغَتِ الْقُلُوبُ الْحَنَاجِرَ وَتَظُنُّونَ بِاللَّهِ الظُّنُونَ. Allah says, when they came, they surrounded you, and زَاغَتِ الْأَبْصَارُ, your eyes, the fear was very clear in your eyes. وَبَلَغَتِ الْقُلُوبُ الْحَنَاجِرَ, your hearts reached your throat. This is the Quran trying to describe how you were so afraid. And worst of all, وَتَظُنُّونَ بِاللَّهِ الظُّنُونَ. You Muslims who saw the miracles, you started doubting in God. Why? Because this was a test. هُنَالِكَ ابْتُلِيَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَزُلْزِلُوا زِلْزَالًا شَدِيدًا. At that moment, even the mu'mineen were tested. And they were shaken. There was an earthquake for them. They were shaken in their hearts, in their minds. Their faith was shaken. There. Why? Because one man, Amr ibn Uwayd, he comes and he jumps over the trench. And he tells them, you believe in heaven? You believe in the hellfire? Okay, if you die, come and fight me. If you die, you will go immediately to paradise. And I will go to the hellfire. Come and fight me. You believe in heaven and hell? Come and fight me. He keeps calling and calling and calling. They're all silent. Until he lost his voice. He says, وَلَقَدْ بُحِحْتُ مِنَ النِّدَاءِ بِجَمْعِكُمْ هَلْ مِن مُبَارِسٍ. Is there anyone to fight me? I've lost my voice calling you. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi looks at the Muslims and he tells them, مَن لِهَذَا وَأَنَا ضَامٍ لَهُ الْجَنَّةِ. Who will go and fight this person, and I guarantee paradise for them. They were all silent. All those who they ran for the sake of power, they ran to cause fitna amongst the Muslims. They were all silent except Ali ibn Abi Talib. He says, Ana ya Rasulallah. Rasulullah tells him, wait, O Ali, we already saw your bravery in Badr and Uhud. We saw your bravery on the nights you slept in the bed. Let's see others. He tells them, who will go and fight this man? وَأَنَا ضَامِن لَهُ الْجَنَّةِ. Amir al-Mu'min says, Ana ya Rasulallah. The third time, Amir al-Mu'minin, only Ali ibn Abi Talib says, I will fight him, O Rasulullah. Rasulullah tells him, Ya Ali, hada Amr ibn Wid. Oh Ali, this is Amr ibn Wid. Do you know who Amr ibn Wid is? Amr ibn Wid, he was equivalent to fighting 1,000 men. Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib tells him, وَأَنَا Ali ibn Abi Talib. He is Amr ibn Wid. I am Ali ibn Abi Talib. Ali ibn Abi Talib, Abu Talib was the one who defended you, O Rasulullah. And I am the one who will defend you with all that I have. Rasulullah became very happy. He gives Amir al-Mu'mineen permission to go. And Rasulullah does dua. He says, ذهب الإيمان كله إلى الشرك كله. All of Iman, the embodiment of Iman, went to fight all of the shirk. Because that day, Amr ibn Wid, he was a one-man army. Amir al-Mu'mineen went running to Amr ibn Wid. Amr ibn Wid, he looks at him, he tells him, I know your father. I know your father. And your cousin Muhammad, he sent you here so that I hang you on my sword, so that you are between the earth and the skies. Amir al-Mu'mineen tells him, Rasulullah sent me knowing I'm going to kill you. And I am going to kill you. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he was good in the psychological warfare as well. War is not only battle. There's a psychological element in it. So Amir al-Mu'mineen, he tells him, I will kill you. Amr ibn Wid, he tells him, you know what? I know your father, Abu Talib. So typically, so I don't want to fight you because I know your father. Amir al-Mu'mineen tells him, but I want to kill you. And then Amir al-Mu'mineen tells him, you give anyone you fight, you give them 3 options. You give them 3 things. So he says, yes. He tells him the first, why don't you accept the religion of Islam? Amir al-Mu'mineen, before fighting him, he tells him, why don't you accept the religion of Islam? You have nothing to do with Quraysh. Even Amr ibn Wid, he was not even from the tribe of Quraysh. Because there were ahzab, there were parties that were joining and fighting the Muslims. They had alliances. He tells him, you're not even from Quraysh. You don't even have issues with us. He tells him, say La ilaha illallah and you will be successful. He says, carrying the mountains is easier for me than saying that statement. He tells him, second, then don't fight. You have nothing to do with us. It's Quraysh that is fighting us. He tells him, what will the woman say if I refuse to fight a young man like you? Third, he tells him, then come down from your horse. You're on your horse while I'm standing. So Amr ibn Wid, to show his bravery, he jumps off his horse and he strikes his horse, killing it and striking it on its legs. And then he comes and he wants to fight Amir al-Mu'mineen. He was covered in iron. He was covered in metal. Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, as soon as the battle began, Amir al-Mu'mineen struck him on his leg. He fell on the ground. There was dust. The Muslims, they look. Suddenly they see Ali ibn Abi Talib sitting on the chest of Amr ibn Wid. With a fast strike, he's sitting on the chest of Amr ibn Wid. But they're far. They see Ali ibn Abi Talib. He gets up. He starts walking. He starts walking around Amr ibn Wid, and then he sits down, he kills him, and he ends him. So later on, they ask Ali ibn Abi Talib, oh Ali, what happened? Why did you pause? You walked. You didn't kill him immediately. He says, when I went to kill him, he spat in my face. And I became very angry. But I did not want to kill him because I was angry. I wanted to kill him for the sake of Allah, because he was fighting us. That was what my intention was. So that's why I killed him. Then Amir al-Mu'mineen, he comes back to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, he says his famous statement, ضربة علي يوم الخندق أفضل من عبادة الثقلين. Or تعادل عبادة الثقلين. The strike of Ali on the day of Khandaq, that one strike of Ali ibn Abi Talib, is greater than the worship of the thaqalain, the jinn and the humans, or equivalent to the worship of the jinn and the humans. My dear brothers and sisters, these were some of the contributions of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Of course, Amir al-Mu'mineen, his jihad was with the Prophet for the sake of the revelation of the Quran. Then his jihad changed. His jihad turned into a jihad for the sake of preserving the Quran. This is why Amir al-Mu'mineen, he fought 3 wars. 3 wars after the death of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. And 3 civil wars. The battle of Jamal, the battle of Siffin, and the battle of Nahrawan. And each one of them were just as important as the battles of Badr and Uhud and Hunayn and Khaybar. Because Amir al-Mu'mineen was the embodiment of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. And he was defending the Quran. And he was defending the religion of Islam. In one of the battles, either the battle of Jamal or the battle of Siffin, a man in the middle of the battle came to ask Imam Ali about God, about Tawheed. So some of the Muslims, they say, no, what are you doing? Don't you see he's busy? Let him, don't ask him this type of questions. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says, the question he's asking is exactly the same reason they're fighting us, over Tawheed. It all goes back to Tawheed and the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, he continued that closeness with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, continued until the last moments of his life. And there were many that despised Ali ibn Abi Talib. Why? Because he was so close to Rasulullah. Because he was the embodiment of the religion of Islam. For some people, justice was not, it doesn't fit with them. They don't want that. They don't want someone who is 100% Muslim. They want someone who cuts corners. They want someone who is not fully practicing. Someone who is going to give exceptions here and there. They didn't like that. Amir al-Mu'mineen stuck with the truth. This is why Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi says about him, Aliyun ma'al haqq wal haqqu ma'a Ali. Yaduru ma'ahu haythu ma dar. Ali is with haqq, and haqq, righteousness, is with Ali ibn Abi Talib. It follows him wherever he goes. My dear brothers and sisters, one of the greatest blessings is if you are a follower of Ali ibn Abi Talib. If you're a Shi'i, true, sincere follower of Amir al-Mu'mineen, thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala 1,000,000 times. Because there are many that slowly they were derailed away from the path of Ali ibn Abi Talib. If you are a follower, a sincere follower of Amir al-Mu'mineen, thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this hidayah. Alhamdulillah alladhi hadana lihada wa ma kunna linahtadiya lawla an hadana Allah. It is God who guided you for the wilayah of Ali ibn Abi Talib, Amir al-Mu'mineen. And the greatest thing that will be weighed on the scale, according to the hadith of the Imams, is the wilayah. Ma nudiya bishay'in kama nudiya bil wilayah. Nothing is as heavy as the wilayah on the scale, because your wilayah will define your tawheed. Your wilayah will define whether you are following the sunnah or not. Your wilayah will define your worship, whether you're worshipping the way Rasulullah worshipped or you're worshipping the way other people worshipped. Because slowly, within just a few decades, just a few years after the death of Rasulullah, the salah even changed. Even the salah, Rasulullah prayed in front of the Muslims every day. This is why after the battle of Jamal, Amir al-Mu'mineen was in Basra. There was one of the companions, he saw Imam Ali praying after the battle. He looked at him and he says, this is the salah that Rasulullah prayed. Meaning that those others, they were not even praying the same salah that Rasulullah prayed. This is why today you look at Muslims, you see they're divided even in the simplest things, even in salah, even in the prayer. So follow Amir al-Mu'mineen and you will be with Rasulullah, because he was the closest to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. My dear brothers and sisters, on a night like this, let us turn our hearts to Kufa, where Amir al-Mu'mineen was in his home on his final night. He would have iftar during the month of Ramadan in the houses of his sons, one day at the house of Imam al-Hasan, Imam al-Hussein, and on a night like this, Amir al-Mu'mineen was in the house of his daughter Kulthum, according to some traditions. And she prepared iftar for him. She brings some bread, some salt, and some milk. When he sees she brought 3 types, milk, salt, and bread, he tells her, "Oh, my dear daughter, when have you seen me eat when I have 3 types of food on the table?" She tells him, "What? This is nothing." He tells her, "Take away one of them." She says, "I wanted to take away the salt." He says, "Take away the milk." Meaning, Amir al-Mu'mineen, all that he had was some bread on his last night. And he says, "I want to meet my Lord with an empty stomach. I want to meet my Lord not having ate, with an empty stomach, because that's how I feel the ubudiyah. That's how I feel the closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala." That night, Amir al-Mu'mineen ate very little, she narrates, and she says he would go and he would look at the sky. He would keep looking at the sky and he would say, "Hiya wallah al-laylah allati wa'adaniha Rasulullah." This is the night that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi promised me. This is the night that my head will stain, the blood of my head will stain the beard. My white beard will be stained by the blood of my head. She says, that night he kept praying and he took a nap. In that nap, he woke up startled and he said, "Ya Rasulullah has told me that within hours, within moments, within a short while, you will be with us, O Ali ibn Abi Talib, and we are waiting for you in the last 10 of Ramadan." Amir al-Mu'mineen, as it came close to the Sahar time, as it came close to the time of Fajr, Amir al-Mu'mineen was ready to leave his house. He was ready to leave that house. The final time Ali ibn Abi Talib walks out of the house, because the next time he will be carried back to the house. As he goes out, there were some ducks that were gifted to Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam. They were in the yard. So the ducks, they came in front of Amir al-Mu'mineen and they started quacking. So Amir al-Mu'mineen, he begins to say, "Sawa'ihun tatba'uha nawa'ih." These quacks will be followed by cries, where everyone will cry for Ali ibn Abi Talib. Then he wants to open the door. The door was tight. As he pulls on the door, his belt opens. So once his belt opens, he begins to call out, "Ishdud hayazimaka lil maut, fa inna al maut laqika, wa la tajza' min al maut idha halla biwadika. كما أضحكك الدار كذاك الدهر يبكيك." He says, "Ishdud hayazimaka lil maut." Buckle up, tighten your belt for death. You're going to death. So, and then he says, وَلَا تَجْزَعْ مِنَ الْمَوْتِ إِذَا حَلَّ بِوَادِيكَ. When death comes, that's it. You have to go. There's no running away. There's no escape from death. كما أضحكك الدهر كذاك الدهر يبكيك. Just as time has made you laugh and smile, this time will also make you cry. Amir al-Mu'mineen entered into the masjid. He saw them, they were sleeping. He wakes them up, and Amir al-Mu'mineen, he goes and he performs the final adhan in Kufa. This is the last time Ali ibn Abi Talib, he has a mu'adhin, but he wanted to perform the adhan. The Imam of the Muslims, the Khalifa of the Muslims is performing the adhan. All of them, everyone in Kufa, they hear the voice of Amir al-Mu'mineen calling, "Allahu Akbar, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah." Then Amir al-Mu'mineen, he goes and he prays. Now some, they say this might have been the nafilah prayer. the prayer before the Fajr. Others, they say it was the Fajr prayer. Anyways, as Amir al-Mu'mineen is praying, he does his sujood. As he is lifting his head from the sujood, عظم الله أجوركم يا مؤمنين. Abd al-Rahman ibn Muljam, he strikes Ali ibn Abi Talib on his head while he is lifting his head from the sujood. As soon as the sword struck the head of Amir al-Mu'mineen, he fell in his mihrab. He fell in that place where he used to do sujood. He fell down, and the first thing he calls out was Fustu Rabbil Kaaba. I am successful, I am victorious by the Lord of the Kaaba. Allah has finally given me that victory, finally given me that shahada that I have been waiting for my whole life. Amir al-Mu'mineen falls. His mihrab, the place of his prayers, filled with his blood. Jibreel calls out between the heavens and the earth, where everyone hears the call of Jibreel. تهدمت والله أركان الهدى وانفصمت والله العروة الوثقى قد قتل علي المرتضى قتله أشقى الأشقياء. He says the foundations of guidance have shaken and the Urwat al-Withqa has been destroyed. Ali ibn Abi Talib has been killed. Everyone heard that cry. They run out. They see Amir al-Mu'mineen is laying in his mihrab. As-salamu ala Abil Hasan al-Mujtaba. السلام على شهيد المحراب والصلاة. السلام على من خضبه شيبته. السلام على من خضبت شيبته بالدماء ونعاه جبرائيل بين السماء. تهدمت والله أركان الهدى. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Let us raise our hands in dua by these holy nights, by the حق of Amir al-Mu'mineen. نسألك اللهم وندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا الله. يا الله يا رحمن يا رحيم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات. تابع اللهم بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات إنك مجيب الدعوات. إنك غافر الخطيئات. إنك على كل شيء قدير. يا علي يا عظيم يا غفور يا رحيم. أنت الرب العظيم الذي ليس كمثله شيء وهو السميع البصير. وهذا شهر عظمته وكرمته وشرفته وفضلته على الشهور، وهو الشهر الذي فرضت صيامه عليه، وهو شهر رمضان الذي أنزلت فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان، وجعلت فيه ليلة القدر وجعلتها خيرا من 1000 شهر. فيا ذا المن ولا يمن عليك، من علي بفكاك رقبتي من النار في من تمن عليه، وادخلني الجنة برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات نهدي ثواب الفاتحة مع الصلوات.